Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for May 20th, 2020, quite around 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, taking a look at the sea surface temperatures, this is coming off the newer high-resolution coral reef daily sea surface temperature anomalies updated as of yesterday. These are always about a day behind, so that's why it was updated as of yesterday. You do notice here in the ENSO 3.4 region, which is this area right and through about here, our temperatures are starting to fall through and really just fall off the cliff here, and have been over the last several weeks due to very strong easterly winds that have persisted across this area, causing a tremendous amount of upwelling. Now, there was a relatively strong westerly wind burst that occurred just off the screen here over in the western Pacific. Now, some of this might try to mix in and over here in the Nino 4 region, but generally in the Nino 3.4 region, this should continue to cool off. Really, there's really no chance of this becoming an El Nino this year. It's not going to happen, and the environment is not going to really be favorable and favored for there to be an El Nino this year. So all indications are we are heading towards a ENSO cool, neutral cool, or even a La Nina by the peak of the hurricane season into the winter of this year. Again, that's going to set up favorability for the main development region of the Atlantic and the Atlantic as a whole to be green, 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 and we should be seeing the activity peak up again. We could even be talking about something heading into June here, and we'll touch on that here in just a few. But you do notice that the MDR of the Atlantic is fairly warm. We're probably transitioning into more of a pretty significantly warm AMO signal for the main development region. We're kind of in a different AMO signal right now, but still we should be seeing that continue to peak over the next couple of weeks and months. Now, taking a look here, this is the probability of El Nino, neutral, or La Nina conditions. This is for the early May CPC outlook, and this is the official probabilities. Again, this is through right now. We are really in that time frame where our probabilities are roughly stacked in through about 80% here. This is June, July, and August, right? This is August, September, October right here. And you do notice that the probability for neutral conditions should be right about 50%, with El Nino only sitting about a 10%. And that El Nino really does not even grow that much, even in through the beginning of next year. So we will likely be seeing a La Nina transition here later in the year that should continue to favor the Atlantic Basin to take over as a whole. If you take a look here, this is the GOES 16 visible satellite. This is from about roughly 2 o'clock this afternoon from tropicaltidbits.com. You do notice that there is a tropical wave, that the first official analyzed tropical wave that is actually right over the Lesser Antilles right now, or just to the east of just to the west of the Lesser Antilles, about approaching there. The trough axis is sitting something like that, with some of the convection off towards the islands right now. Again, there's still a fairly significant amount of shear that is kind of trailing off out of here from the eastern Pacific in through the Atlantic. So this area as a whole is not quite ready for development yet, but we are seeing a fairly big convective burst with that tropical wave. Again, this is not expected to develop in any way. You also have this upper level low across the Tennessee Valley over here that is actually helping to produce the shear that was ripping apart Tropical Storm Arthur, which Arthur's remnants are somewhere in here and could be affecting Bermuda actually within the next couple of days or so. And this is tied along with another front here and another sort of semi-front there, with the remnants of Arthur back in here again. The National Hurricane Center has discontinued advisories on Arthur as it became post-tropical yesterday, so really not a big deal there. But interest in Bermuda could be seeing some heavy rainfall and gusty winds as the remnants of Arthur do pass by. This is our upper level low across the Tennessee Valley. That will be bringing some showers and thunderstorms to portions of the Mid-Atlantic states. The actual Weather Prediction Center has issued a high risk for flash flooding across portions of the Mid-Atlantic states today. So there is a fairly significant flash flooding risk. Again, even a non-tropical system can produce a very significant amount of flash flooding. So that is one thing to keep in mind. You notice the stable air mass right off the California coast there. Again, stable marine air mass out there, and this is the Eastern Pacific Intertropical Convergence Zone. Again, not really much going on, although we could be talking about something coming up later in the period. Also, to take a real quick look at the Nino 3.4 region, again, this is also from tropicaltidbits.com. This is the CDAS method for the temperatures of the ocean. And you can really see that we've fallen off a cliff here really since about late April. We've fallen off a cliff, and we are actually sitting at today at about negative 0.3 degrees Celsius below the long-term average. So El Nino typically starts at about 0.5 degrees above the long-term average, which we actually peaked there through about mid-April, from about March in through mid-April at about a little over 0.5. Now we're actually heading down towards a La Nina type environment. So again, really no chance of this skyrocketing back up and becoming an El Nino. Again, typically for an El Nino or La Nina, for both of them, you need about a 3 to 5 month period to be classified either a La Nina or El Nino. So those, because the environment will always lag behind by a few months. So that's something to keep in mind. But we are watching a system we are watching what could be a developing system somewhere either in the Eastern Pacific or the Atlantic come by late May, like the last couple of days of May in through early June. We could be watching what could be developing across the Eastern Pacific or the Atlantic. As known a phenomenon is called a Central American gyre, where we get a spin-up of convergence in Central America, and that creates cyclonic turning in the atmosphere, and what that does is tend to favor convection. And what we're looking at here is the GFS ensembles, I believe this is the GFS ensembles, and this is the 200 millibar velocity potential anomaly from the 28th of May all the way out through June 4th, and we are looking here. The green colors, they will indicate the chance for higher velocity potential, higher potential for thunderstorms and rising air, while the darker sort of colors within the brownish and red, they will indicate the potential for sinking air and less convection. So typically green, more convection; red, less convection. But generally, it's been much of the same throughout the GFS, the European. All of these models are starting to hint at an increase in the velocity potential across portions of the Eastern Pacific in through the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, and portions of the Western Atlantic Basin. Again, this area as a whole is going to start to become a lot more favorable for development. If we take a look here at the GFS velocity potential anomalies, this is from the 28th of May all the way out through the 4th of June, and this is showing a very favorable environment for enhanced convection, rising air over portions really of all the Atlantic Basin and also the Eastern Pacific and almost into the Central Pacific as well. So there's a large scale forcing here for ascent, and what that could do is that could bring the potential for tropical-like convection to develop along a Central American gyre somewhere either in the Eastern Pacific or the Atlantic Basin. Again, one or the other really has to be determined when these things form. It's really hard to pick out where this is going to form and what places might be seeing a tropical cyclone genesis, if any, really. This is the European forecast mean 200 millibar velocity potential anomaly ending on the 3rd of June from May 29th. Again, so this is ending June 3rd, and you do notice much of the same here. We get this enhanced convergence, enhanced velocity potentials with the curvatures here, and you do notice what that's going to do is that's likely going to bring some convection here to portions of the Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic. Again, if there's a tropical cyclone to form, the most favored area for this time of year typically will belong to the Eastern Pacific, but again, it would not surprise me to see something try to kick off in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico or southwestern Atlantic. Of course, given the fact that we do have fairly warmer than normal water temperatures across this area, combined with the reduced wind shear that we have been seeing across this area and are going to be continuing to seeing as the times are beginning to now change and the westerly winds that are screaming across here will be dying down, favoring less and less of that wind shear across this region. Again, it's going to be something interesting that we have to keep our eye on, and this is taking a look at the 200 millibar wind anomaly or the ensemble mean here. And this type of convergence, this is our Central American gyre, this large scale turning in the atmosphere. That is our area where we're going to see large scale turning, our large scale forcing for ascent. And again, what that could do is on the periphery of any of these could easily spin up an area of enhanced vorticity, enhanced convection, and that could actually try to bundle into a tropical cyclone somewhere in the Caribbean, Southwestern Atlantic, Gulf of Mexico, or in through the Eastern Pacific. We have this large Central American gyre that's spread out through this area. The models are doing an incredibly good job at picking all of this information up, and this is the strongest signal that I've seen in quite some time. Even from looking at this in the past, this is certainly one of the strongest signals that we've seen in the model guidance data from a really long time. So this is really beginning to be something that we're going to have to keep in mind, keep in the back of our heads that, hey, the hurricane season is getting ready to start in 12 days across for the Atlantic Basin. The Eastern Pacific hurricane season has already started. That started on May the 15th, about 5 days ago. We're 12 days away from the Atlantic Basin starting, so again, it's a good reminder to just, if you live along the coastal areas, have your hurricane preparedness kit. We already saw Tropical Storm Arthur that brought some impacts to the North Carolina Outer Banks. Again, it is a general reminder that this is rapidly approaching hurricane season. We are 12 days away for the Atlantic Basin to start. Again, the atmosphere does not care about a calendar. Again, so it is just a general reminder you guys need to be preparing. This could be a pretty busy season, so just understand that. And taking a look here at the GFS, this is also taking a look at the 200 millibar streamline and winds. We are seeing that Central American gyre. This is actually focused more so across portions of the Atlantic Basin. Now, you do notice that we still do have some of that wind shear that's kind of cutting across this area, but not as much of a wind shear problem. Now, that's taking the GFS literally, and again, we know that the GFS has been prone to producing, these tropical cyclones and Central American gyres out the wazoo. So basically, the general message is that within the next couple of weeks, within the next 1 to 2 weeks, we do have something that we could be talking about that could be forming across portions of the Eastern Pacific or the Atlantic Basin from a Central American gyre, which is basically just an area of enhanced convergence and vorticity that could try to spin up into something across this area over the next couple of weeks. If we take a look at the actual vorticity, this is the 850 millibar vorticity looking at the spin in the atmosphere. Again, the higher you go up in this scale and the higher you get up in the contours, the higher cyclonic spin you're getting. This is actually the remnants of Tropical Storm Arthur right here, and this is the island of Bermuda. So again, interest in Bermuda could be seeing some remnant impacts from Tropical Storm Arthur. There's also this elongated front that's kind of draped across here. Really nothing trying to aggregate and congeal across any part of the Atlantic Basin right now. And we do have this rather weak tropical wave approaching the Lesser Antilles right now. But again, that should not be of any significant concern over the next several days. And so far, nothing across portions of the Eastern Pacific as well. So not really forecasting much from there. And if you take a look here at the wind shear, again, this is also just taking a look here at everything that's kind of going on across the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific. The Eastern Pacific now has started to have this area of less and less wind shear, so the Eastern Pacific season could get a kickoff here, but again, not really seeing anything in the model fields other than that Central American gyre setup here. And then we are also taking a look here at the winds really still ripping across portions of the Atlantic Basin right now. a very relatively unfavorable environment as Siri starts going off for some unknown reason. But generally, in the most part, the Central American gyre that could be setting up across this area will typically reduce the wind shear as well. So we are watching for some favorability in the development across the Atlantic or Eastern Pacific over the next few weeks. And taking a look here, this is the 12Z GFS forecast. You do notice that this is the remnants of Arthur out here to about the next 18 hours, passing very close to portions of Bermuda. And again, that just becomes elongated along a front with another semi-system trying to form here. But again, that should drift away, not really be a problem, as there's still a fairly good amount of significant wind shear, and there's not really a lot of, the sea surface temperatures across that area are fairly weak at that point. If we move this out here, again, this is the one thing in the vorticity field that we will show. Again, the GFS tries to develop something here, but that's not really our focus. Our main focus is the Central American gyre. You notice that this large scale turning in the winds, this is our Central American gyre that we're talking about. This is this large area of convergence and increased spin in the atmosphere. And again, this could try to produce something, but again, it's still relatively early to determine that. And if we look here at the European model, again, the European is also trying to develop somewhat of a low up here within 96 hours, but not really focused on that right now. And out to about 168 hours, you do notice that there is somewhat of that turning beginning to set up across the Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic Basin. Again, really not seeing much for an overall large-scale tropical cyclone genesis formation, but again, that Central American gyre could easily kick off something again with the increased velocity potentials, with the enhanced convergence and reduced wind shear across this area, and the fact that the sea surface temperatures are certainly warm enough to support it, and the upper ocean heat content would support something if something were to form across portions of the Caribbean, southwestern Atlantic, or Gulf of Mexico. Again, it is almost approaching hurricane season. It's just a good reminder to stay in touch with everything that's going on. Well, that's going to do it for me today. I know this was supposed to be a yesterday video, but or tomorrow video actually, and not today, but we will start getting into about doing every other day in terms of doing our video updates, and we do have a lot of good projects that are coming in. We do have unmanned camera systems that we are trying to plan and put out in the path of hurricanes that we are going to try to do, so stay tuned for all of that, because we're going to be giving updates on that probably either tomorrow or on Friday. So that's going to be that for today. Hope you all have a safe rest of your afternoon, and I will see you back here either today or tomorrow or on Friday.